What's going on, y'all? You are listening to Chain Reaction with Jeremiah Mitchell and Jeremiah Harding. Thank you for joining us today. Harding, how's it going, man? Good to see you.
Reasonable. It's definitely hotter than it was last time we talked. It's 103 right now.
Thanks for the
So,
update. It's a nice 75 degrees out here, and I was just looking out my window, looking at the sun being out with a bunch of rain falling, which is one of my favorite weather phenomena. What is the phenomena? Phenomena.
yeah,
That's the plural. All right.
yeah.
Um, well, if you were watching on YouTube, I had audio problems. I could not figure out what was going on with my computer. So I started and restarted. If you're not listening on YouTube, disregard that information. Well, today we are going to have a guest, Ford Prefect on Twitter. We're not sure if he wants us to use his real name or not, so we're waiting on that. And he is from India, and he's going to talk a little bit about India going cashless and government biometrics information. That their
Gov-
collection of biometrics and some of the
yeah, it's
implications of
like
that.
mandatory collections.
Oh, awesome. Perfect. India was a little bit of a bright spot in some ways for a while in terms of its economic development. But man, the more development you have, the more likely those parasites are going to come in and breed and expand and desire to just suckle off the production of the market. Very disappointing. Well, look forward to talking to him. Should be interesting, and it's always fascinating hearing from ANCAPs from completely different cultures.
Well, something to keep in mind is that when you hear about like an economic boom from official sources, they might not care about like the conditions in the area or the amount of government interference in the area if their constituents aren't from that area. And so while the Indian news might have something negative to say about, for instance, government biometric scanning, C-SPAN and CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, they may say other things because they want to encourage investment by the people that watch their programs. And so, like, any glimmer of hope that we see, we should really check which lighthouse it's coming from, because it's always telling when somebody talks about developments in a country that isn't the first world but doesn't mention any of the drawbacks. So,
Well, I don't know. There's always drawbacks in some way, but when you see large scale wealth increases and increases of the median wage that take into account inflation, a pretty good sign overall.
well, I mean, it's a good sign, but it's a sign as a part of a collection of a lot of other signs. Like the U.S. Median income, I think, has been plateauing lately instead of dropping,
Oh,
and that's not
yeah, over like
what.
the last 8 years, pretty much.
Well, yeah, but it's instead of a drop, and so that's reasonable. But it's also amidst all these other economic concerns and a huge amount of outsourcing and humans having greater access to um, pregnancy aids, pregnant birth control that sometimes fails, and so you end up with more humans that don't have really a regard for whether or not they create them. You have greater government incentives for having children in the first place. Like you can have a child and get more benefits than you otherwise would have. Um, there's a huge amount to consider. Like the economy can have a boom, but because we live under a Keynesian cycle and not one that respects the business cycle or price theory, you're going to end up with booms and busts, and those busts are going to be really, really strong.
Yeah, and the median wage in the U.S., the reason that's so disappointing that it hasn't gone up a lot is because there has been mass inflation of the currency in the last 8 years, which means there's been a a tremendous amount of inflationary pressure on prices without a corresponding inflationary pressure upon wages. The reason inflation is naturally going to affect wages as one of the last things to increase. We probably do a whole show on that at some point and explain why monetary inflation tends not to have as direct an impact on the price of wages as it does on the price of material goods, specifically more higher order capital goods. Bunch of stuff in the
Especially
news.
fractional inflation too, by the way.
The
I
what?
mean, if you fractional inflation, where people invest in banks in exchange for that bank basically multiplying in
Oh yeah,
artificiality their money.
yeah,
So
fractional reserve banking. Yeah, that's a lot as well. All this data systems. Inflation is just through both direct quantitative easing type shit and Federal Reserve banking is just one of the most insidious ways that wealth is ripped out of the hands of the everyday person and the producers and the people actually making shit in society and given to the upper ranks, the people who have control over the people who have control.
yeah.
Still a bunch of shit in the news, race stuff. There was a free speech rally in Boston. I think last week, maybe the same day of the show, maybe the day after, that was shut down by a bunch of protesters. My understanding of that is that it was nothing like the Charlottesville rally. It wasn't a bunch of white nationalists. It was not they didn't have any Nazis there. There were a couple people who were going to come to the free speech rally who were at the Charlottesville rally. At the free speech rally, people said, no, you can't come visit us. And then still 20,000 people from Boston and probably surrounding areas, the Antifa, tend to drive a long ways, I think, especially when they have their summers off before they go back to their Marxist education, their local university. Driving around, they shut down. Oh, they basically protested massively a giant free speech rally, which is a part of this process that is happening right now in culture at large, which is very disconcerting, where hate speech is not deemed free speech, and people are starting to equate people who desire free speech with racists or Nazis. There is, I think, part of the purpose of this shit is to have people conflate those two things in their mind. That advocates of free speech are somehow similar to or related to or a part of the same group as the Nazis. Really, that's what they're doing now. I mean, I saw multiple tweets this week talking about how Donald Trump was a Nazi in all seriousness. So, make any sense? But people don't give a shit.
Well, I mean, because the whole, if you can label speech an offense, if you can label, free speech the same as hate speech, and if you can label hate speech illegal, then all you have to do is form a cabal of government officials that have enough, well, and their corporate backers, that have enough sway and believe you, or at least say they believe you, say that they're on your side, and you can start enacting anti-speech laws that prohibit certain words from being said or certain ideas from being spread. And in doing so, you can create this Orwellian newspeak where everything is controlled from the top down, and if you control the language, then you control the world.
Yeah, it's much more difficult to get ideas to spread when ideas aren't free to spread. There are millions of really shitty ideas out there that I don't like, but I would like people to be free to express them, or else we're all fucked.
Of course. And not to mention that, but the Davos elite were casually discussing a device that manipulates the waves in your brain so that they can either read and interpret or outright change your thoughts. So they're coming out with that now too, and everybody's casually sitting by while it happens, talking about free speech issues.
Yeah, I'm hoping they are pretty far enough away from making that effective on humans. Like I see that stuff all the time where people where you see different sorts of even consumer goods coming out now where people can do things like type with their brain and control
Hmm.
things happening on the computer with their brain. And that is not that if you can do that, that process is probably going to be able to be reversible in some ways. You know how the brain works well enough that you can channel brain waves to affect some sort of external thing, then you probably understand the brain enough to affect brain waves in various ways and stimulate different parts of the brain to change the way people think or how they act or how subdued they are. I'm just hoping that tech is further away than it seems to be. That
Well,
it is as yet ineffective because it's difficult to seeing a way out once if that's ever cheap enough to make en masse. It's bad enough that they have education and television as brain control technologies.
well, I mean, because the thing is that when you have this technology, it's sort of the same as many other technologies, and it's based on systems that can exponentially speed up in their efficacy, given a very small amounts of time. And so I'm going to send you this link in the Twitter chat. Um, but like the idea of this sort of thing should definitely be opposed, because if they can get into your brain, then then there's nothing private. You can't have any secrets, and those who want that sort of power generally have nefarious motives,
Definitely.
motives that definitely go against human liberty. But beyond that, if they can use it for that, then they can use it for many other things. And if they want to start trying to change people's thoughts because they've already started to target bad memories, um, then they'll be able to change people's minds, um, you know, over a very short period of time. And then all you would need to do is black bag somebody and literally brainwash them to get them to do what you want.
Yeah. Well, we'll be selling tinfoil laced beanies at the Chain Reaction store in case anyone wants one. Feel like it's almost time to start wearing tinfoil to keep people out of your brain.
Well, here's the secret to that. Tinfoil is a bad idea for that. It actually amplifies and
Oh no.
concentrates the signal in your brain.
What about
So
aluminum foil?
it's the same thing if you put it as a dome
How do
and
I keep
it's
them out of
made
my
of that sort of
brain?
metal. Well, you would need a Faraday system. You would need to have a copper lattice system that's fairly tightly interlaced, and then the signals would bounce off of that because it's a semi-ferrous metal. And so the idea is that it traps the frequency and then pushes anything that isn't trapped back. It's much more effective. Some of it still gets through, but not enough to make any serious impact on you or your technology or whatever you want to protect with a Faraday.
I'll be copperheads.
Exactly.
All right. I was hoping to talk about Nazism a little. Nazism. You guys, I'm having a
It's
real hard time
Nazism.
with words today. I don't know why. It happens. It's maybe most days. All right. Do you want to bring on Ford Prefect? Is he ready? We ran out
I
of time.
believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. You bring him on. I'm bothered. The reason why I want to talk about Nazism is because people are painting communism and Nazism as if they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum, when really they are both very big government, large hindrance into the lives of the individual and state economic control of everything that's going on. All right, Harding, introduce our friend.
Well, okay.
Is he not connected yet?
Yeah, he's not connected yet.
Oh, okay.
I think we should wait until he is.
Yes, we should definitely wait till he is. I thought he was on. That's cool.
Okay, he's on now.
Go for it then.
So this is Ford Prefect on Twitter. His handle is Vimuktatma. I think that's how you pronounce that. And
yes.
And that's spelled Vimuktaatma if you want to follow him over there. And his bio reads, free from the shackles of societal conditioning, free from the bindings of institutionalized slavery, and free from the trappings of dogma. He's an anarchist in India, and he's going to talk to us today about government biometrics collection and India's push to a cashless society.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
So, how are you doing this? I don't know. Is it morning over where you are?
It's 3 a.m.
3 a.m.?
Yes.
How often do you stay up till 3 a.m.?
It's actually a little, maybe an hour or so past my usual bedtime.
Okay.
That's okay. So, not a big deal. I work till pretty late.
Yeah, you stay up late usually anyway. My son went to sleep at 2:30 a.m. last night, which was about 3 hours later than his usual bedtime. Real rough.
Oh, well, Jeremiah Harding was up till 3 a.m., I guess, yesterday when he talked about this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a late night guy. I am too a little bit, but he's single and always looking to not sleep that much. Is what it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, I have this problem where I try to get too much shit done in the day, and then I still want to have some recreation at the end of all of it. So like I'll do a bunch of shit, and then like I'll have an hour or two before sunrise, and then I'll still need to get my little bit of recreation at light at the end of the tunnel in, and I'll wake up 3 or 4 hours later.
Punch keeps getting bigger.
Yeah. So we hear that you've got some information on how the Indian government has been moving toward a cashless society, and I think the phrase was mandatorily collecting biometric data.
Yes. There are two different things, but when you look at them together, it's like 1984 right there. So
yeah.
I'll start with a little background on this.
All right.
When we talk about cashless, I would say trying to move towards a cashless society would be a better description, because the demonetization measure that they went with a few months ago, it's kind of fallen flat on all fronts.
How so?
Even as in the they had certain reasoning which they had stated while going on with the measure. They were looking for a few objectives which they didn't. I mean, they were big failures at all fronts, and at the same time, it hasn't really been cashless. Means in a few months, barely a few months after they did away with the two highest denomination notes, it's kind of back to the earlier cash levels again. I mean, not exactly, but almost there. Like almost 90% of the demonetized currency has been remonetized already. So we back to similar cash levels as earlier.
Oh,
But
wow.
uh, well, people power. What can one say?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, the minute
so
the
a little
government wants to go
background.
cashless, that's when you say, "Oh, well, I should get some more cash on hand." It's like the minute they want to try to ban guns, it's probably a good time to try to acquire a gun. Whatever they're doing, usually the opposite of your best interests.
Exactly, exactly. So a little background on this. Now we got independence from the British in 1947, and since then it is like the last 70 years or so. Mm, an obnoxious majority of that has been a single party ruling over the country,
Okay.
and that party was basically a family. So uh, it's led by a family. It has been led by the family, except for maybe a few years in between. So these people they went ahead with a whole lot of destructive policies. Uh, there was a whole lot of nationalization of stuff. Like 47, when we got independence, around that time itself, the industry, most of the industry was either nationalized or given away by strict licensing to certain cronies. So
Most of what industry?
all industry,
All
so
industry.
either
Okay.
the government ran it itself,
Hmm.
or some cronies were given licenses to run these industries, and these were a small bunch of cronies. So uh, that started off the whole thing. Then the
Yeah.
next thing that was nationalized was the banks. So sometime in the late 60s, all banks operating in the country were taken over by the government, and so that was basically the next step in this.
Yeah.
And uh, a few months ago, 8 November of 2016, to be precise, uh, cash holdings were nationalized. So what the prime minister did on that day was like around sometime in the evening, he had a public meeting somewhere, and in that meeting he announced that the 500 rupee note and the 1000 rupee note, which are the two largest denominations of currency, they would lose legal tender status by midnight of that night. Um, so it was like barely 5 or 6 hours notice, uh, and
Yeah, I remember hearing
they
about
they
that.
did they did offer a couple of months of window for people to go to the banks and get these notes exchanged and or deposited. But then there was something else that was lurking right behind. They promised new notes with new denominations, but they hadn't printed enough of them.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sorry.
Oh,
And and the new 2000 rupee note, which they'd introduced after this, the bummer was the ATM machines were not calibrated for that. That was slightly wider for the ATM machines.
so
So
so I didn't know that they were going and transitioning to higher rupee notes and actually replacing the cash. I had no idea that that's what they were doing with it.
yes, I mean that was
Why?
in fact okay. To
I
give
thought
you
they were
some
just trying
perspective,
to make more transactions electronic so they could track them better,
okay.
but
Now
they're replacing them.
yes. Okay. Let me give some perspective to this. First of all, 500 and 1000 rupees aren't that big a sum if you look at it in purchasing power terms. 500 rupees is something like say $7.50, and 1,000 rupees is around $15. So that's one. Second, the 500 and 1,000 notes were almost like they constituted around 85% of the cash in circulation.
Yeah.
And the economy itself, like almost more than 80%, more than three-fourths at least, I mean, on a very, very conservative estimate, more than three-fourths of the economy is in the informal sector, which does not deal with banks. It's cash only.
Yeah. Okay.
So they had to replenish. I mean, there was no way they could just take away that much of cash
Mm-hmm.
uh, without any alternatives. So um, they did that, but they didn't do it well. I mean, of course, the government's doing it, so we can't expect the government to do anything well.
No.
So,
No, they can't even
um,
get the printers to work fast enough to create their fiat currency.
well, exactly, that's what happened. And for like almost 4 months, the as I said, like more than three-fourths of the economy is cash only. That entire sector got hit so bad, and we're feeling the repercussions of that even today. For example, a couple of months ago, the agriculture, the winter season, they harvested the crop for the winter season, and everything. It was like a fire sale out there. Everything was dirt cheap because there wasn't this entire supply chain is primarily cash driven.
Hmm.
So there wasn't any liquidity available. So everything was going away so cheap, and it's like bad on the farmers.
Yeah.
And I mean, India already has a state of farmers committing suicide, driven by huge debt. Because again, I mean, formal banking hasn't reached the villages, and they're left at the mercy of some very unscrupulous private lenders. Because again, money lending is heavily licensed by the government. So
Yeah.
uh,
Limits your options.
yes,
Yeah.
so that, and then there was this whammy because they had to sell off their crop at very, very low rates.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's sad.
yeah, so we feeling the repercussions even today everywhere. A lot of informal businesses collapsed because there was no cash, and then you had people like daily wage laborers or small vendors who had to stand in queues at banks or ATMs to get their cash, and that was so much of productive time lost. So it was mayhem for 4 to 5 months. But yeah, things are slowly coming back to normal. We, as I said, we already are back at almost um, 80-85% of the earlier cash levels. And well, here this is one of the funniest things about the whole episode. The central bank so far hasn't given us a tally of how much cash was returned to the banks, how much of the demonetized currency came back to the banks. Till date, the window ended 31st December, and that was the last date
Oh,
people
jeez.
could submit their demonetized notes over to the banks. But so far, they haven't given out a figure. And a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, they had a parliamentary panel which was told by the central bank that they're still counting notes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot.
Uh,
It's a lot to count. It gives them something to do
there's
at least. Engage in their anti-productive
actually
labor.
so many of the notes to be counted.
You know, if
So,
you could just
anyways,
get like Parliament to count the notes, get the people in charge to do it. If they can spend their time just counting bills, then they won't be making these laws to screw up the economy and basic human relationships.
you bet, you bet. So there's a theory doing the rounds, and it's fairly credible as well that the central bank has received more number of notes than were officially out in circulation. So, so yeah, coming to why it has been a failure. When the government announced this measure, they had given three primary reasons, which kept changing as time went by. But the three reasons given initially, the first one was they wanted to crack down on black money, which is basically unaccounted money, money which has not been revealed to the taxman.
Okay.
That was one reason. Uh, the second reason was that this would be a crackdown on counterfeit currency, and the third was that this would be a crackdown on terrorism, which India has seen like a spate of terrorist attacks for the last at least 2 to 3 decades. So terrorism is a very emotive issue out here. People will take anything if they're told that okay, this would break the terrorists back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these three reasons were stated at the beginning. So let's take up the first one. It was cracking down on black money. Now the problem here is that as per the government's own estimates, there was some white paper that was released like 3 or 4 years ago, which talked about the quantum of black money in cash, which was barely 5 or 6% of the unaccounted for money. So the cash component of that, like most of these corrupt people, the people who skim away public funds or those who indulge in um, all kinds of corruption through government machinery, um, they they put in this money into other forms of other stores of wealth. Like a lot of it goes into real estate, a
Yeah.
lot of it goes into banking accounts. So the cash component is very small. It's and the second thing is that cash by itself is neither black nor white. It's the last transaction that it was a part of which makes it either black or white.
Right.
Black as in unaccounted and white as in accounted. So
Yes. Sometimes
you
people, including governments, have this notion that most people just sit on large piles of cash and don't do anything with it. If it just sits there non-existent, but even drug lords spend it on something, and then it eventually, like you're saying, circulates back and finds its way into the white market. Changes
exactly.
frequently. Yeah.
Exactly. So the cash thing was a no-go from the start. I mean, even if you had gotten close to like even 100% of the cash, even if the government had managed to stamp that out of the market, it wouldn't have been worth such a disastrous move or such a disruptive move, a negatively disruptive move, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, So that was the first reason. The second reason was counterfeit cash. Well, the other day, like barely a week ago or so, I tweeted, like, isn't monetary inflation counterfeiting by definition? So
Yeah. Right. If you
what
want to get
exactly?
counterfeit currency out of the market, then you should get your currency out of the
Yeah,
market. I mean, the notion,
stop
just
your print.
thinking about it, the notion that all you have to do is say this this is currency is demonetized, and that's it. That all you have to do is make that, sort of a law declaration, is just a really good indicator that what you're using as currency is nothing, insubstantial. I mean, you can't demonetize a gold coin, by just making a decree. Like it's always money.
And one more thing, I mean, if you talk of counterfeiting, there has been a lot of counterfeiting in the past as well. And as you said, I mean, the gold coin can't be counterfeited. Similarly, anything which is made with paper in a printing press, it has to be counterfeited sometime or the other.
Yeah.
Somebody will do it because it's 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 easy to do it. Anybody can do it. All you need is a printing press and a well-designed block. That's about it. So that was the second, and the third was the terrorism part of it. Uh, yes, to some extent, this would because I mean the entire uh, spectrum of industry was disrupted. It went for a toss. So naturally, I mean, terrorism, crime, etc., would also be a part of that. But um, again, if you look at it over the last few months, because of like after demonetization, there have still been a lot of terrorist attacks, and in a few cases, terrorists have even been found with the new currency notes on them.
Yeah.
So yeah, so much for a crackdown on terrorism. So yeah, so these three fronts failed, and with time, people started realizing. So the next thing they moved on was, yeah, we want to nudge the economy towards a cashless society, and they pushed a whole lot of uh, wallets. Basically, these are again a new set of cronies. Wallet providers, online wallet providers.
Okay.
These are basically like PayPal, but again,
Yep.
they have to be licensed, and there are a lot of restrictions and so on. So
Wow.
that came up. The government also came up with its own apps and stuff. So every bank
Hmm.
started coming up with its own app, but then there are huge security holes in that. Like for example, they came up with a platform called UPI, which is Unified Payments Interface. Now, UPI is sending practically everything in clear text over the internet. So your passwords,
Yeah.
credentials, everything is out there in clear text, and that's like a hacker's dream.
Yeah.
So um, end of it, so they came up with this thing of pushing towards cashless, but again, that's a failure, um, and nothing concrete has really come out of this. I mean, we're back to where we were 8, 9 months ago, and nothing much has changed. Now, just today or yesterday, the bank has announced two new notes. There's a new 50 rupees note and a new 200 rupee notes. There's a talk of the 2000 rupee note being slowly phased out. So it's a lot of engineering happening, social engineering happening
Yeah.
on that front.
Even when some people are well-meaning in government, at best, government is just a well-meaning idiot with too much damn power. And they
I
cannot
wouldn't
make rational decisions.
I,
It's
I wouldn't be so gracious and call them well-meaning.
at best. At best. I was I would say
Okay,
that is rarely the
qualify.
case.
Yeah.
Um we're running a little low on time, but I really would like to hear about this forced biometrics stuff
Yeah.
or
So,
whatever. What does that look like for your daily life or for you?
so for
Whatever that
me,
is. Yeah.
I still haven't submitted mine. So I am living with a lot of restrictions on my daily life. My bank has stopped online transactions on my account and on my debit card.
What
So
sort of biometrics do you have to give them?
uh, iris scan and fingerprints.
Okay.
So what happened was the last government, it came up with this scheme called Aadhaar. Now, this was initially introduced as an authentication measure for the subsidies, the uh, direct payment of subsidies that the government takes up on different commodities. Like, for example, cooking gas is subsidized. A lot of food items are subsidized. So earlier, what used to happen was these subsidies were routed through public distribution systems, but there was a lot of leakage in that, a lot of siphoning off of funds. So what the last government did was they came up with this new thing where every beneficiary of these subsidies would need to get this card by submitting their biometrics, and they'll be given a unique identifier, very similar to the social security number you guys have in the US.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be the authentication measure uh, for all these subsidies to be directly paid into your bank account. So you had to link your bank account with your number, and then the rest of the things would follow. The current prime minister, when he was in the opposition, he was a huge. Um, he he was hugely against this whole measure because I mean he had the right words and everything when he was campaigning. Like, this is a demon. It needs to go away. We shouldn't have anything like this. It's dangerous, and that was the rhetoric. Now, within like a month of him coming to power, he had like a 45-minute meeting with the chairman of the agency that was delivering this mechanism, and that 45 minute meeting, it entailed a 180-degree turn on his earlier stand.
Hmm.
He, he made it fundamental to so many new schemes that his government was launching. And he came up with an acronym, JAM, which is kind of the bedrock of whatever this government is doing. J stands for A and M is Aadhaar and mobile, and I forget J what J was.
Hmm.
So, but like this government is a champ at acronyms. They come out with an acronym for everything. It's kind of a source of big humor on social media as well.
That's funny.
But yeah, um,
Well,
so
well, it's good to know
Aadhaar,
that no matter what their ethnic background, politicians are all the same on the inside. In 45
oh,
minutes, they can turn turn on a dime. No matter where you're at in this world, they're always insidious and self-interested, looking out for to use their power for their own benefit.
oh yeah, they are. So this is how the whole thing started, and then there was a big push by the government to get more and more people enrolled under this. Right now, as per government figures, which I don't trust, but yeah, they won't be very off. More than 90% of the population is already registered under the scheme.
You
So,
get frozen out of your
uh,
bank account, makes sense.
no, the bank account isn't frozen. They can't do that.
So,
But yeah, I mean,
what was your situation then? What is your
my
situation?
situation is they've stopped online transactions. So
Okay,
I
that's what
can't
it.
even online. I can operate my account. I can deposit and withdraw money from and into it.
Okay,
I can use my card at points of sale, physical points of sale, but I can't use it online. But then I
gotcha.
figured
I
out my ways
misunderstood.
around. I've figured out my ways around it. I use a lot of my private mesh networks in order to get around it. I mean, I pay my
Okay,
friends cash, get them to do online transactions, and it's working out.
all right.
Not a very big thing, but yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would be inconvenienced because of this. A
Yeah.
lot of that 10% which hasn't gone in, and now what they are doing is they are forcing you to link your phones. They're forcing you to link your bank accounts. They're forcing you to link everything with this Aadhaar number. So what in effect they're doing is they're linking this biometric database to everything else out there. So even your private providers have access to it. So the government over here has this thing called KYC, Know Your Customer, and Know Your Customer is a policy that is forced in practically every industry out there. So they all need to have some documentary proof of who their customer is. And this Aadhaar, the biometric ID, becomes the cheapest form to get this KYC done. So most of the private providers are also jumping into the bandwagon.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that everybody who's connected, they have access to your biometrics. I mean, the government's saying it's secure, but there have been many instances where people have shown that it's not secure.
Duh.
There's this
How can it
there's
be?
this there's this agency called Center for Internet Security. It's a private watchdog, internet watchdog. They couple of times they've hacked into the system and the government has gone after them. Uh, there have been people who have been apprehended by the cops for having hacked into the system. So it's a clusterfuck all over.
This
Yeah.
just sounds like a beta test to the Mark of the Beast. You familiar with Revelation?
Not really.
Yeah.
You'll have that.
Well, if you ever read the Christian and Jewish Judeo-Christian Bible, then you'll hear about the mark of the beast in the book of Revelation, and it's a thing that's connected to all of your finances, all of your personal information essentially, and it's required to make purchases and basically participate in the economy. And it was considered to be one of the signs of the end times by the author of that book. So if you ever want to have a fun little spelunk into how things are going, just read Revelation.
Well, it's sounding exactly like what's happening out here.
Yeah. In Revelation, my interpretation is that it's talking about Nero. Nero is his letters
Yeah,
in the Hebrew, Nero, Caesar, and all the money is printed with his name and his face on it. So in order, you have to use this, what is considered, because there was big time, worship of Caesar during the time of Nero. So you have to participate in this idolatrous practice just to purchase a good or service, and a lot of Christians tried to avoid that during the time. It's just
well, that's exactly what it is.
yeah,
Uh,
and this essentially all started because of subsidized goods and food, basically. Yeah, that's just a classic government bait and switch. Here's the bone. Now we will shut the cage on you. You lead people with the carrot, and you say, "Hey, come on in. We got these subsidized goods. Oh yeah, that's awesome. All right, cage doors shut. You're ours now."
Welcome, Bernie. So
Yeah.
that's where we are now. They're pushing it. They're tying everything down to it now. Identity theft, which Indians weren't really uh, they weren't really familiar with it so far, and now it's going to be like all in a day's work in a few months from now.
That's insane.
It's beyond insane. I would say it's like vogue on poetry.
Well, so basically what they're doing is they're making sure every human in their tax form is catalogable.
Yes, absolutely. And now they're like they've come up with a new goods and services tax, which is going to make everybody a part of the tax fund.
You know, there's a guy, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he also lives in India and is also libertarian, and his name is I think it's pronounced Jaimin Vaishnav, and he did that video series where he tagged places taxation is theft. I thought that was pretty bold.
Oh, him and I, we were together at this group that we'd formed together called Indian Libertarians.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I'm,
think I
I'm
like that Facebook page.
Okay. They have a very active Facebook group where they have a lot of discussions going on. But I'm not part of Facebook anyways. I quit once I realized the data privacy dangers at Facebook. So
Well, if you don't want your going data also going to the CIA in America, then you wouldn't want to be on Facebook. So that's understandable.
true. Not just the CIA. Even there's something known as NatGrid in India, which is kind of built on the lines of the NSA.
Yeah.
So they're also doing it in house. As
I was just like, I just saw a thing where like the CIA hacked NSA and FBI servers. It's just I just saw the article. I didn't even read the article, just the headline, so I didn't see the details. It's just so funny concept, like of three agencies doing essentially the same thing, trying to get information from one another. They're not even efficient at collecting data and violating rights, thankfully. All right,
true.
I'm running out of time personally, so we're gonna head out pretty quick. Thank you for joining us and telling us about some of the details of stuff going on in India. It's always interesting hearing about
I'll
different life
actually I'll do one
situations.
thing. I'll send you a few links which I had curated as part of my preparations for this.
Okay.
I wanted to stay up to date, so I'll send you a few links which you can probably add to your YouTube video whenever you're putting it up.
Yeah, we'll put it on the episode page for this show. Time to free
Oh,
us, episode 33.
before we hang up,
Yeah.
what's the weather like over there?
Yeah, thank you, Hardings.
It's monsoon, so it's been raining practically all day with a few stray bouts of sunshine here and there, but it's been raining pretty hard.
Well, there you guys go. You know the weather in India, and what is it? Is it the 28th over there through 3:30 or 4 a.m. or something like that?
Yes, it's quarter to four.
All right, awesome. Anything you want to plug? Do you want people to find you on Twitter or something?
Well, you already gave out my Twitter ID.
Oh yeah,
There's something else I want to plug here. It's
yes.
not my own thing, but it's a very interesting podcast which focuses on Indian issues from a Bastiat standpoint, the
No.
seen and the unseen.
Very cool.
So it's on a website titled seenunseen.in, uh,
Okay.
and that's like around 30 odd episodes old. So it's a brilliant place for libertarians to catch up on what's happening in India.
Well, how about
Thank you.
you tweet that out on your personal account, and we'll all retweet your tweet to get you some traffic.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll do that. I'll do that. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you
Harding.
for having me here. Thank you for giving me
Yeah.
this platform. And it was wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, you as well, and anytime, because like we need the perspective on a global level. Americans tend to focus on America a little bit too much, I think, and the global politics are key and influential to why America does what it does. So it's always useful and valuable to have somebody like you on.
True, and it cuts both ways. I mean, even we here we tend to focus more on domestic issues, but as you said, it's always good to have a handle on what's happening in the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
good to know other people are in the struggle too, all over the place.
True, true.
All right. Well, I'm going to say
All
goodbye to
right.
everyone. Thanks for joining us today. You can follow Jeremiah Harding on Twitter at Insanity is Free and listen to the Moment of Rage podcast. Anything else, Harding? I cover you?
Oh yeah, pretty much it.
All right. All right. And you can follow the show's Twitter feed at Chain Reaction, and the T is a 1. Thank you for listening. I hope you all have a great and productive week where you become more of the person that you want to be and live more of the life that you want to live. All right. Peace, y'all.
See ya. Goodbye.